we've been learning about how to factor binomials. Today we're going to start section 5.3, which is factoring trinomials. Now let's look at a trinomial right here, x squared minus 3x minus 40. Well, what would give us that is if we multiplied the binomial x minus 8 times x plus 5. Remember, we can multiply that by doing the FOIL method. First times first is x squared. The outside and inside would give us negative x plus 5x. And the last term times the last term would give us negative 40. And of course the middle two terms combine to give us negative 3x. Now multiplying is what we did in the last chapter. Now we are going to start with the answer x squared minus 3x minus 40, and we're going to break it up or factor it into x minus 8 times x plus 5. Let's look at a relationship here. To get the x squared, notice it's the first term in the first binomial times the first term in the second binomial. And the last term here, negative 40, is coming from the last term in the first binomial times the last term in the second binomial. So it's first times first gives me first, and last times last gives me last. The middle term here is a combination of the product of the inside and outside. And I'm going to work on that as I use the FOIL method. So let's take this example and let's try to work backwards now and factor it. So let's start off with x squared minus 3x minus 40. Now in the scissor method, the first step is you're going to make a chart here, and in the first column you're going to list factors of the first term. Now we're really just concerned with the coefficient of the first term, which is 1, and of course the only numbers that can multiply together to give me 1 are 1 times 1, so that's what goes there in the first column. Now in the last column I'm going to look at multiples that will give me negative 40. Well, there's several different options there. There's 1 times 40, 2 times 20, 4 times 10, 5 times 8. I can use any of these combinations. And I'm supposed to get a negative 40, so that means one of them has to be negative. Alright, let's just start with this last set right here, which is 5 times negative 8. So I'm going to use these numbers and place them in the last column. Because remember, last times last is what gives me the last term here. Now, the third step is to cut across. That just means you're going to multiply across. So we're going to have 1 times 5, which is 5, and 1 times negative 8, which is negative 8. Now we're going to add those together to see if that would give us the middle term here. And that'll tell if we have the right combination. Well, negative 8 plus 5 is negative 3, so that means this is the correct combination. This is the correct order of the chart. Now once you have your chart complete, the rest is fairly easy. You're going to write your answer using these numbers left to right. So our answer would be 1, and then of course x. You know it has to be x because it has to give you x squared. So that's going to be 1x and then minus 8. Remember, we go left to right when we write our answer. So it's 1x minus 8. And then in the second binomial, we'll have 1x plus 5. Or you can just write that as x minus 8 times x plus 5. Now, it really doesn't matter what order you write that in. You could write x plus 5 times x minus 8. But these are the two binomials that multiply together to give you x squared minus 3x minus 40. Let's take a look at some other examples on our blackboard and get some more practice. Okay, on example 3, to try this, we have y squared minus 13y minus 30. And again, we're going to apply the scissor method. Well, in the scissor method, the first step is to list the factors of your first term. The first term is just 1y squared. So the only thing that'll give me 1 is 1 times 1. Now in this last term here, we have a couple combinations we could use. We have, of course, 1 times 30 we could use. That gives me 30. 5 times 6 gives me 30. 3 times 10 gives me 30. And of course, we also have 15 times 2. So any of these combinations could work. Now, because my first factors are just 1 times 1, really the numbers in the last column are going to be used to determine the middle term here. So I'm going to try to look for factors, combinations of factors that'll give me 13. So it looks like 3 and 10 will work. So let's try those. And you have to be very careful and pay attention to your signs. I have to get a negative 30, which means one of these has to be negative. Now, for which one should be negative? Well, I have to get a negative 13, so that means the larger one should be negative. So let's make this 10 negative. Now, if you don't get your signs right, when you're checking it, you'll figure that out and you can adjust accordingly. Let's go ahead and apply the scissor method. So we're going to cut across. We're going to have 1 times negative 10, which is negative 10, 1 times 3, which is 3. Okay, well, positive 3, negative 10, add to give me negative 13. No. And even if you change the signs and have a negative 3 and a positive 10, that wouldn't work either. That would just give you a positive 7, so that doesn't work. And you can't make both of them negative, because when you multiply negative 3 times a negative 10, you would not get a negative 30. So one of them has to be a negative and the other one has to be a positive, but then they will not add together to give me 13. So let's try another combination of factors. Let's try 15 times 2. We'll do that one down here. So we're going to have 1 times 1, which gives me 1y squared. And then we're going to try 15 times 2. It doesn't matter whether you put 15 on top or bottom. Just have the numbers 15 and 2. And we have to get a negative 30, so one of them has to be negative. But because our answer is supposed to be negative 13, I'm going to make the larger number negative. So let's try negative 15 and positive 2. All right, let's cut across. We're going to have positive 2 here and negative 15 here. And those two will add up to give me negative 13. So that is the right combo. So now we just write our answer left to right. So we're going to have 1y, or just y, and then minus 15 times 1y, or just y, plus 2. And of course you can check that using the full method. If we check that, and it's always a good idea to do a quick check, you'll have y times y, which is y squared. Outsides would give me 2y. Insides would give me negative 15y. And the last two would give me negative 30. Of course, those middle two would add up to negative 13y. And that is the problem that we started with, so that does check. Okay, on example 4, this one's a little different because we have an x squared, but we also have another variable here, y squared, and we'll have to keep that in mind at the end here. But we're going to approach it the same way. We're going to do the scissor method. So we're going to have to list the factors of the first term, which are just going to be 1 times 1. Then we're going to list factors of the last term in the last column. Now for 8, we don't have that many choices. It's either just 1 times 8 or it could be 2 times 4. Now remember, we're just using 1 and 1 here, so whatever we multiply it by is really what's going to end up adding to the negative 9. So obviously I want to use 1 and 8 because those could add up to 9. So let's place 1 here and 8 here. Now it has to multiply to give you a positive 8. So both the signs are either going to be positive or both of them are going to be negative. Now because it's adding to a negative 9, that means I want these two to be negative. So negative 1 and negative 8 would give me positive 8 when I multiply them. So let's do the scissor method, cut across, and see if this is the right combo. 1 times negative 8 is negative 8, and 1 times negative 1 is negative 1. Those two would add together to give me negative 9, so this is the right chart. This is the right combination. So our answer is going to be 1x, or just x, minus 1. Now don't forget to put your y here because you have to get a y squared on the end right here. So I'm going to put a y there. And then we're going to have 1x, or just x, minus 8y. Now when you're checking it, this is why it's a good idea to do the check, you will see that you forgot the y's. If you forget the y's here, you'll figure that out as you check it. So make sure you always go back and check it. This one will give you x squared. In the outside terms, you'd have x times negative 8y, which we always write in alphabetical order. And then the insides would give you negative 1xy. And then the last two would give you positive 8xy. Of course, these two would combine together to give you negative 9xy, so this one checks as well. Okay. Okay, so on the last term here, let's have 8y squared. Don't forget that should be 8y squared there, because negative y times negative 8y, that should be a square there. Let's make that 8y squared. And there we go, that one does check. Example 5 is another trinomial that we need to factor. So let's put a 1 right here. So our first terms would give me 1 times 1. That's what gives me 1 squared. The last term is 4, so that's either going to be 1 times 4 or 2 times 2. Now remember, we're trying to get 3, so let's use 1 times 4. Now both the signs have to be positive because we have to get a positive sign, or both of them have to be negative because we have to get a positive 4. They have to be like signs. But because this one's negative, let's make these negative. Okay, let's check it and see if we have the right combination here. When we cut across, we're going to have negative 4 there And we cut across this way, we're going to have -1 here. Now -1 and -4 do not add up to -3. Well, you can try to change the signs and make this a +1, and that would give you -3, but then you're not going to get a +4. It wouldn't work out that way. In fact, no matter how we try to change the signs, it's not going to work. And this one will not factor, and it's called prime. That's what we call it when it does not factor. So you would leave your answer just like that. Now, as we go through these examples, we need to remember a couple things. First, we're always supposed to look for a greatest common factor. Now, in this example, we don't have a greatest common factor, but we always have to also make sure it's in descending order. Remember, descending order is ax squared plus bx plus c. This one is not quite in descending order because if you have more than one variable, it has to be in descending order by the letter that comes first alphabetically. So it should be in descending order by the variable a. So we'd have a squared, and then we're going to pick out the one that has a to the first, which is positive 3ab minus 18b squared. So remember, if there's two variables, you have to put in descending order by the variable that comes first alphabetically. So it would be a squared, a to the first, and then the term with no a in it. So this would be correct order, in descending order. All right, now we can go ahead and apply the scissor method. We've got a 1a squared here, so we're just going to have 1 times 1. And then we're going to have a -18 here. Well, there's a couple different combinations for that. We could have 1 times 18. We could try 6 times 3. We could try 2 times 9. Any of those would work. Remember, because these are ones here, after we do the multiplication, we're really just going to be using the factors of the last term. So let's try to pick some factors that will give us 3. Well, it looks like the closest one we have is 6 and 3. We could get 3 from 6 and 3. So let's try 6 and 3 for the last column. Now, it has to give us a -18, not a +18, so one of them has to be negative. And my answer has to add up to a positive 3ab, so I'm going to let the larger number be positive and the smaller number be negative. All right, let's try cutting across and see if this is the right combo. We're going to have 1 times -3, which is -3, and 1 times 6, which is 6. Now 6 and -3 does add up to +3, so this is the right combination. Now we're just going to write our answer left to right. So we'll have 1a, or just a, plus 6b. Don't forget, our last term has a b from that b squared. And then 1a, which is just a, and then minus 3b. And that's our answer. Don't forget to check it using the full method to make sure that we have the right answer, and it would check. On the last example here, we have -p squared minus 36q squared plus 13pq. Again, the first thing we should always do is look for a greatest common factor. Now, at first glance, you may think that it doesn't have a common factor, but notice how the first term begins with the negative, and we never want it to begin with the negative. It throws everything off. So we really do want to take out that negative sign, which is equivalent to taking out a -1. You can write the -1 there if you want, but you don't have to. Remember, when you take out a -1, it's just changing the sign of everything on the inside. So we'd have a positive p squared and a positive 36q squared and a negative 13pq. Also, we have to make sure it's in descending order. And if there's more than one variable, it should be in descending order by the variable that comes first alphabetically. So it should be in descending order with the p's. We have p to the second, and then we should have p to the first term. This one right here has p to the first. That should be next. So let's rewrite this in descending order, and then we can use our scissor method. So we're going to have p squared minus 13pq plus 36q squared. All right, now we're going to apply the scissor method. Right here we just have a 1p squared, so that's just going to be 1 times 1. And for 36, there's a couple different combinations we could use. 1 times 18, 2 times 9, 3 times 12, 4 times 9. And we're looking for the combination that would kind of add up to 13, or that would give us a possibility of getting 13. So let's use 4 and 9. Now let's look at our signs. It has to give us a positive 36. So it's either going to be a positive 4 and a positive 9, or a negative 4 and a negative 9 to give us a positive 36. Well, looking at this other sign indicates that they're supposed to add up to a negative 13. So we're going to have to put our negative signs on them. That means they're both going to have to be negative to add up to a negative 13. All right, let's cut across and make sure we have the right combination. We have negative 9 this way, and this way we're going to have negative 4. That would combine to negative 13. So that's going to be the right combination. So I'm going to write my answer left to right. Now don't forget, when you come down here to the end, you have to bring down the negative sign. That's part of the answer. And the first set of parentheses, I'm going to have 1p, or just p, minus 4q, because we have to get that q squared term here on the end. And the second set of parentheses is going to be 1p, or p, minus 9q. And that would be our final answer, but don't forget to check it with the FOIL method to make sure everything is correct.